All right, I'm going to get started, even though it's possibly 30 seconds early, but I want to allow plenty of time for discussion. So first of all, welcome everyone, and thank you so much for being here at what is really a pivotal time for the college. My name is Maya Tolstoy, and I'm the Maggie Walker Dean of the College of the Environment. And I want to just say a few words before we get started. But first, also, I want to acknowledge that the University of Washington acknowledges the Coast Salish peoples of this land, the land that touches the shared waters of all tribes and bands within the Suquamish, Tulalip, and Muckleshoot nations. I also want to just say a few thank yous. These events do not organize themselves, and Monica Cataldo, John Meyer, Russell and Shui have all put hours and hours and hours of planning into this over the last few weeks. So thank you to them. Thank you also to the whole Strategic Planning Committee, who are all dedicating their precious time to grappling with this complex task, and many of whom are joining us for this event. Again, thank you to all of you who are here today, also to those who couldn't be here but have submitted questions and suggestions, and those who are watching this afterwards on the recording. We need your voice, we need your input, we need your ideas. So why are we doing this and how will it be used? For the why, it's hard to overstate the importance of the work done in the college at this moment in history. Whether you are working to understand the fundamental processes of our planet and environment, how we manage resources, the nuances of climate change, or working on policies and solutions in partnership with communities, our work has never been more vital and urgent. The college has come a long way since it was founded over a decade ago, but to fulfill our potential, we must take advantage of the extraordinary depth and breadth of scholarship, teaching, and service. If we can harness this breadth and depth, we are capable of addressing and solving some of the most pressing and daunting environmental challenges facing our planet. However, we need to work together to set the strategic direction to get there. We must define our vision for the future and identify our collective goals and objectives, all of which need to be underlain by integrity and clearly articulated values. And we need to ensure that the culture we continue to build is one that is inclusive and welcoming to all, so that we can do our best work and have the greatest positive impact. So how will this be used? I hope it will provide a North Star of sorts that can guide our decision making and help us focus our efforts. It should include an inspiring articulation of who we are, what we do, and where we want to go. Something that we all, but myself in particular, can use to help raise our profile and raise resources for our college. As the recent $1.7 billion gift to Stanford shows, our work is in enormous demand, and we should be thinking appropriately big in our ambitions. We're clearly not there yet, but with your help, I'm confident we will get there. Our strategic planning efforts are being closely watched by the university leadership, as well as the deans lay out the plans for the next capital campaign, which will include cross-university fundraising around climate action and adaptation. Will the plan guide our hiring? I hope so. This is a strategic plan for the college, by the college community, and so my hope is that we can identify key strategic themes that all units buy into and that we will all want to commit resources to, including faculty lines. What it will not be is a laundry list. If you are here to ensure that your niche is called out on the list of things that resources will be dedicated to, I strongly encourage you to reorient your thinking. If successful, everyone should see a place for themselves in the plan, even if you don't see yourself in all of it. Can you keep doing exactly what you've always been doing? Yes. But this is also an opportunity to broaden that and think about how you can enhance that work, how you can build more bridges across the college and the university and the wider community. I can tell you that resources are most likely to be directed toward those bridges, toward coming together to be more than the sum of our parts. We need a plan that is specific enough that we can map a path forward that takes advantage of our core strengths, but nimble enough that it doesn't limit us as new discoveries are made. So what do I see as our core strengths as a college? So here are three that I definitely see. One, there is no question that our depth and breadth is one of our greatest strengths. But if we aren't taking advantage of that, we are missing out on an amazing opportunity to have more impact and make greater discoveries. Number two, we sit within a major R1 university that is number 2 in the country in terms of federal research dollars. We are a research powerhouse college within a research powerhouse university. We can leverage our impact through collaborations across the university. And number 3, we have a deep commitment to serving the public good and long-standing existing ties with a broad range of external communities. This is a vital strength as we grapple to understand ecosystems of which humans are an integral part and as we enhance our work in the solution space. Finally, I close with a reminder of the UW motto of be boundless. Please, as you think about where we want to go as a college, be boundless, be bold in your aspirations, think big. If we are able to come together to think big, we can launch our college into a whole new level of discovery and impact. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to the co-chairs, and Shui is going to start next. Let me just, that slide is not moving forward. I wanted to. Slide problem.
Okay. Okay, let me try something else.
Oh, there we go.
Okay, good. So this is sort of, you can use your app to put in the questions and things. This sort of a short introduction, instruction for how to use a slide load. I'm going to use the first tab. So I'm going to leave that for a second, so you can take pictures if you want to on that slide. We'll be using the app for taking questions. So while you're doing that, first of all, thank you, Maya, for the informative introduction. And I am Shui Chen. I'm a professor in atmosphere science. I'm also associate dean for research of the college. I co-chair, along with Russell Callender, for the steering committee. Here we are on behalf of the committee, which many of you are in the audience. Russell and I would like to welcome you and thank you for participating in this town hall. So we want to really use this opportunity to provide an update on what has been some work done by the committee. And more importantly, we are here to seek your input and your help in the process. So take this as a beginning or starting point of where on this journey to get this really complex process going, and it hopefully will have a product as a strategic plan we can all be proud of. So let me see if I can move the slides. Okay, so in this, I wouldn't read the agenda, but let's say that we would like to start with a very, very brief history of the college itself. Then we move on to the process itself. So let's see. Okay, now it's working. So this college was formed about 13 years ago in 2009 and brought together a very diverse discipline in environmental science and then put it into one of the most powerful and largest science-based, environmental-focused academic organization in the world. Dr. Lisa Gremley served as inaugural dean since 2009 until last year. So we'd like to read you a quote from the original document when we formed the college. It's actually quite bold in the way that you can think of this as 13 years ago. Higher education will be the core of the developing solutions to environmental challenges. It will provide the critical understanding of the planet and the natural and the human systems, informing effective policy and technology developments and developing future leaders. It is our responsibility to serve, and it is our intent to lead. So just think about that, and I will do the fast forward to now, 2022. So we have a new dean in place, Maya, just started beginning of this year. And over the last 13 years, as you can sort of all realize, our society, our environment has evolved rapidly. And we are dealing with quite a different world today than 13 years ago. It is really an important time that we reevaluate this in developing a new strategic plan to take into account what we are currently are and how we're going forward. So with the help of the consulting firm AKA Strategy and also the steering committee, which is listed here, that we begin the work back in May. As you can see, the committee includes the representative from all units of the college, and the faculty, staff, and also students and postdocs. So quite a bit of diverse representation on the committee. As the process goes, we have sort of roughly divided into 5 phases. Phase 1 is the time AKA Strategy started interview back in May of a number of groups, and I'll have that in the next slides. And pretty much all the stakeholders that really is the one that to develop this strategic plan of the entire college. And since then, we're going to the second phase. The committee meet a few times, 3 times to be precise, and getting the input from that interview where we identified some priorities and try to formulate some very initial strategic planning framework. And here we are, the phase 3, town hall. And I consider this to be the most important one because this is where we really want to get your input. And as we send it out in that questionnaire, we would like you to provide your statement of mission and vision along with the committee. So we'll take your input very seriously, go into the next phase, which is drafting the strategic plan itself. So here's about 13 groups listed on here that including a very broad group with the faculty and all different groups of faculty represented and the staff. Well, I wouldn't repeat this, and students, postdoc, and so on. We'll continue the process. We'll be interviewing more alumni, tribal representative, business leaders, corporate partners, and others. So that process is still going on, will be continued. So here we are. Again, I want to emphasize draft. This really is the beginning of a draft vision. So we asking you to provide your version of this in the questionnaire. That questionnaire continue to be open. So I actually don't need to read, but for recording, I'm going to read this for the online later on to record this event. So the vision, the College of the Environment envisions a sustainable and equitable planet Earth. where decisions are made based on collaborative interdisciplinary science, centering environmental justice and integrity in our work by empowering the next generation of scientists, educators, policymakers, and change makers with the tools they need to have a positive impact on society. Once again, this is just a draft. Please provide your version. I'm sure some of you probably have a better way to express this than this draft. So now, this is a draft mission. So the College of the Environment is a world leader in addressing the challenges posed by our rapidly changing planet. But the next sentence, I think, is the most important for our mission. We integrate broad expertise in fundamental and applied science, as well as a solution-based approach to observe, understand, predict, solve, and educate for a sustainable future. So once again, I hope you all come up with some of your own, and let's make this a better statement than we currently have. So with that, I'm going to pass on to Russell to discuss the next part of the update. Thank you, Russell.
Thanks, Shui. Appreciate that. I'm going to do my best to not spill my soft drink all over the computers here, but we'll see what happens. So I'm Russell Callender. I am the director of Washington Sea Grant, and I'm a co-chair with Shui of the Strategic Planning Steering Committee. So based on nearly 100 interviews and 3 steering committee meetings, we've developed a draft framework for the strategic plan. The framework was shared with you in the invitation to the town hall. I will talk briefly about what the framework is and what it's not. It is, as the name suggests, a framework for the plan. It's an architecture, it's an outline. It lays out the initial organization of the plan and stakes out areas on which the plan will focus. The next four slides, I'll walk through what we're calling strategic priorities. And this is where the steering committee has really focused our conversation so far. And so for shorthand, we can think of these priorities as a research priority, a solutions priority, an education priority, and a culture priority. So I'll walk you briefly through those priorities and then some of the thinking behind them. So again, I hate reading slides, but I'm going to do it for the recording. The first priority is creating new knowledge in service of our shared planet. Advancing our understanding of the world's natural systems and of human influences on those systems by integrating research across the college and university, leveraging the breadth and depth of our expertise, and drawing from broad communities around us and beyond. So fundamentally, this priority is really about supporting and building on our research enterprise. This priority will be addressed by drawing on our world-class foundational research and the applied work done by the large number of centers, institutes, labs, field stations. We will likely include suggestions for developing new collaborations across the college and university as well. We can't do this alone. To enhance and accelerate our research to mitigate and adapt to a constantly changing natural environment, we must supplement our own knowledge, expertise, and resources. We will do so by collaborating with entities beyond our college and the UW campus, by crossing traditional boundaries in academia, and by working with the public, private, and nonprofit sectors. It is our intention to serve as a model for how environmental research and solutions are constructed and implemented, centering environmental justice, multiple ways of knowing, and integrity within our work. The next priority is developing high-impact solutions through transdisciplinary collaboration and partnerships. Developing sustained collaboration across disciplines and with partners across and outside the university to accelerate our research and develop high-impact solutions to the world's most pressing climate and environmental challenges. So this priority is really focused on accelerating and transitioning our research into action that will make a positive difference for the planet. For decades, foundational research at the university and the college has expanded what we know about the natural environment. Our core missions of knowledge creation and education are incomplete without engagement and communication with communities on local to global scales. Such engagement encourages people to demand sound environmental stewardship from their leaders and to demand information from institutions that help them make sense of environmental challenges in the context of their own lives. This priority is intended to ultimately increase our impact more broadly and better serve the public good. Candidly, this priority has been a tough one to develop within the steering committee, and I'm still not sure we have it right. I suspect that many of you may not think we have it right either, so we do want your input to strengthen this one and the others as well. Strengthening and expanding environmental education. Teaching, learning, and outreach that enhances transdisciplinary thinking and leadership among UW students, faculty, and our society, creating widespread understanding of the natural world and of human impacts upon it, empowering the next generation of leaders and inspiring service and action. So this priority is focused on enhancing our educational efforts to create a cadre of the most influential thought leaders of tomorrow. Maya mentioned in her introduction our deep commitment to serving the public good and our long-standing ties with a broad range of external communities. Basically, we want to build on this strength and inspire positive and societally relevant change. We will increase our commitment to collaborative, interdisciplinary science and education, centering environmental justice and integrity in our work. We will educate and empower the next generation of scientists, educators, policymakers, and change makers with the tools they need to have a positive impact on society. The next priority, fostering a cohesive and inclusive culture. Fostering a culture of diversity, equity, inclusion, and justice that is deeply woven into the college's inquiry, education, outreach, and administrative practices, and in which we actively engage communities most at risk from environmental harm. Ultimately, as Maya mentioned, we want to make the college a welcoming and inclusive culture, and that's what this priority is all about. The steering committee has had some conversations about whether to have this priority sit as a standalone priority or to integrate DEI principles into all of our strategic priorities. Because this priority is so important and critical to the college, we decided to keep it listed both as a standalone priority and also incorporate its principles into the 4 strategic priorities. We have a document called the DEI Task Force. We can use that recent report to help inform the actions of this and potentially the other priorities as well. And as an aside, but I think relevant, is we are in the process of recruiting a new associate or assistant dean focused on DEI in the college. And we hope that that individual will be on board in time to help influence the direction of this priority. So if you read through the framework, you notice that there's some action listed under the strategic priorities. These actions are very draft. They're placeholders at this point and represent a starting point for further deliberation. And so in your questions and comments, I would urge you to, frankly, don't pay a lot of attention to those. Wait until they're a little bit further along and a little bit less draft. Also, as you read through the mission vision and the 4 priorities, it's clear that they need additional work. At last week's College of the Environment Executive Committee meeting, somebody said that these all sound like they were written by scientists. And I pointed out, even worse, they were written by a committee of scientists. So we need to try to think about being a little bit better in terms of how we communicate these priorities. And I'm making fun of myself because I had a pen on a lot of this text. So this is the figure that Shui showed before, the process graphic. So after today's conversation, what we want to do is incorporate your questions and comments into steering committee deliberations. Between now and early January, the steering committee will create 4 subcommittees, one for each strategic priority, to tighten the focus of each priority and develop tangible and achievable actions to support it. I sent out that note to the steering committee today, a little bit later than I wanted to, but we're going to kick that process off immediately. These subcommittees they've given the option to welcome others into the college. Let me start over. The subcommittees have given the option to welcome others from the college into those conversations at the subcommittee level and help shape the priorities. The subcommittees will share their work with the full steering committee and feedback before inclusion in the strategic plan. And meanwhile, and concurrently, our contractor, as Shui mentioned, will be continuing interviews as we talked about earlier. The next 2 to 3 months are going to be a very intensive time focused on working on the core of the strategic plan. We will meet again as a full steering committee in early January, and the steering committee will proceed through several iterations of drafting, review, discussion, and revision to reach a consensus on a penultimate draft of the plan. This draft will be shared widely within the college and among selected outside stakeholders for comments and feedback, providing an additional opportunity to shape the plan before being approved by the steering committee and then hopefully being approved by the dean. Lots of process, but I think it's a good way to try to get as much engagement as we can. So I'm going to kick it open for questions here in a second. We want to hear your feedback. We want to hear your questions. We want to hear them about the process. We want to hear them about the substance of the priorities and the mission and vision. These are the questions that were in the town hall invitation. And note that questionnaire is open for additional input from you until December 9th. And I would say that all comments, questions are fair game. And we welcome candid comments, but be constructive. We're trying to do this together, so being positive and thoughtful and constructive would be super helpful. So again, the process for connecting into Slido is up here. What we'll do is take questions initially in Slido. We've also got an option to get questions from the audience if you want to write it down on a card. And if the conversation has a little bit of a lull in it, we've got some input and questions already from the survey that we sent out. So let me open up Slido. I don't think I'm supposed to do anything else. Nope. So I'll leave that open for now. And you're going to be able to, I'm supposed to do it. No.
There you go.
I can't see it. Now I totally messed it up. Can I get your help real quick? There it is.
There it is. Perfect.
I knew that once you ran up here, I'd make it happen. So as I understand it, we will see questions start to populate the screen. Is that correct? I know you've got questions. So Monica, will questions just...
As people submit questions, they will populate.
Okay, perfect.
It says that's the first one, so no one's done one yet.
There we go. I will read the question for the folks that are listening in. Do you expect additional strategic priorities or goals beyond the 4 that you outlined? I would say quite candidly that almost anything is in the cards. What we're doing is really passing each one of those priorities to these subcommittees, and they may find as they start to work through them and to flesh out actions beyond that, that there may be redundancies or overlaps. So we might end up dropping a priority or combining priorities. And if there's something that comes out in the conversation that looks like we missed, then we'll absolutely consider it. If you got ideas, I'd love to hear them. The second goal of creating high-impact solutions needs to include social acceptability, high-impact, socially acceptable solutions. Great, thank you. and it's got a couple thumbs up, so that's why it popped to the top. Okay, lots of centering, I'm going to the bottom, in solving climate and environmental challenges, but nothing about sustainability or sustainable development of fish, wildlife, and forests. Yeah, I think point well taken, and you know what we are trying to do as we continue to move along is develop some concrete steps and actions that'll have a bit more, hopefully a lot more detail behind them and a lot more meat. And I think thinking about sustainability is certainly going to be key. I'm waiting for somebody to dive in from the steering committee and tell me that no, but I think I'm okay. I'm with you. The priorities seem pretty pedestrian and don't reflect our uniqueness. Is this intentional? No, it's frustrating. I think it's been really hard. As somebody said, this seems like it was written by scientists or a committee of scientists. We're too modest. And I think there's that tendency to show that modesty instead of saying, what are we really going to do that's going to make a huge difference for our region, for our state, for our planet? And it's not there yet. And that's why, I know there's a lot of visionary thinkers in the college. And so, that's why we're trolling for more information, more thoughts, more input. It disappeared on the big screen. I'll have to go up here. How are subcommittees being formed and what's the timing? So basically the subcommittees are being formed from the steering committee itself. There's 4 to 5 members on each of those subcommittees, and as I said, they will be able to reach out and get information, feedback, ideas from others within the college. So there's certainly going to be opportunities to do that. I would also say, and Shuey might kick me under the table if we were at a table, but reach out to Shuey and I as being a conduit. If you've got other input that you'd like to connect, like to get in, or you'd like to connect with steering committees, we're happy to help facilitate that effort. Go ahead, speak loudly. I might probably repeat your question.
Are we actually allowed to speak?
Is need a recording?
Yeah.
There's only one mic.
Yeah, that's one thing.
I'll try to speak as loud as I can, and I can repeat this if you like.
Sure.
I think one of the things that might touch on all 4 of your items there might be a focus on something that we've begun calling urban seas. There's something like 150 of those around the planet, and more than 1 million people living within kilometers of the shoreline of the continents. Urban seas tend to be places like the Sailor Sea, or Chesapeake Bay, or Galveston, or Mumbai, or any place around the world. And they are central to the economy of the planet because trade goes through there as well as industry. They are also places where degradation of the ecology takes place. And they're also places that have to be defended for any homeland because they are very vulnerable to attack. So I'd like to suggest that an educational program and an economic program to look at the resilience of such systems around the world using the Sailor Sea as the metaphor or analog would be an ideal thrust that would bring into account oceanography, coastal science, forestry, farming, fisheries, policy of all sorts, and indeed funds perhaps from an outfit that we know is present in the Sailor Sea, Puget Sound, the U.S. Navy. They have about $3 to $4 billion expended every year in this area. They too might be interested in seeing a comprehensive study of the entire system to make sure that the economy remains vital, the ecology does not decline any faster than it has to, and that people educated in the area might actually take an active role in supporting it. So maybe it ticks several of your boxes.
Yeah, thank you. Would you mind if I shared a couple of the documents that you've already shared with me with the steering committee from?
I would be honored.
Thank you. Appreciate that. Appreciate the comments. How big can we dream here? Do you expect this will lead to raising additional resources, or is this meant to be practical? I would urge you to dream first, as we've talked about. You know, we need to be dreamers and schemers at the same time. You know, if we're not dreaming big, I don't think we're going to ever realize our potential. And you know, I will share my own experiences previous to this in strategic planning, where we developed a strategic plan that a lot of people said, "Oh my gosh, it's too simple. It's not detailed enough." Yet using that plan to not only bring the organization together, but to also market what we did to our core funders, I was able to raise the budget in my program over 3 years by $93 million. I'd love to be able to pull that off here, but I think if we don't dream big, we're not going to be able to attract big support. I don't know if you want to touch on any of this, Maya. Not to put you on the spot.
No, I really appreciate the question. And, you know, as I said in my intro remarks, absolutely, please dream big. And yes, that is how you raise additional resources. And I think we need that clear and simple but really compelling story to do that. And there are so many conversations going on about raising resources but coming up with a clear message. I think there are endless opportunities for that, but we need to do our homework first to tell our story. And I will also refer back to there was it may be off the list now, but there was a question about how it being rather mundane, not really being unique to who we are. And I think part of that telling our story, it needs to focus in on what our core strengths are. So that's one of the reasons I articulated some of those core strengths. But I think we really need to find our niche and tell that story, and we can absolutely think big with it. And if we do that, I'm confident there will be big resources that will follow that. So thanks for the question. Do you want to tell Rick Spinner story about his response to our...
Sure. You know, so we had an opportunity within the last couple of weeks to speak to a guy named Rick Spinrad, who's the current head of NOAA. And Maya mentioned in that conversation that we're developing the strategic plan, and we laid out these priorities. And he was like, well, that's great, but how does that make you unique? This could be almost any other institution. And I have felt the same way in the conversations to date. And again, I think it's part of it. We're trying to be too modest, and frankly, we're not willing to go big. So Rick wanted to see our plan when it was done, and I'd love to hand him a plan that's going to knock his socks off, and Noah's going to want to throw money at us. Anyway, I suggest a preamble that consists of the first sentence of each priority, what makes the college unique, and then the last sentence is the punchy priority point. Yeah, again, I don't disagree with that at all. I think having professional writers come in, somebody that may be more of a communicator versus a scientist, kind of helping us as we work through the plan, I think would be super helpful. There we go. John, where are you? We can help, he says. We've got a comms team in Sea Grant too, and other groups have. I think there's a lot of professionals that we could engage to support us in this effort.
Russell, can I make a comment on one of the questions?
Please.
On social acceptable.
Oh, I missed that one.
Right. So there was a question about adding the socially acceptable solution, right? So then there's a follow-up question: is socially acceptable by whom? Who to decide, right? I think it's a really good example of how these things will be developed in this very complex environment, because we had an event. We talk about this. So people in that event, a few people sit together in the circle, And the 4 different people has very different opinions what is socially acceptable. So I want to give you an example of when we go forward to do this, is that renewable energy, for instance, is acceptable for many of us, right? But then if a certain infrastructure turbines developed right at a certain historical site or indigenous community, that's not acceptable to certain community. So this is really complex and need research. So that's where we want to kind of develop this thing with a thoughtful, but at the same time, you need to be bold, and you can see the complexity of how to develop something bold, but at the same time, a very thoughtful strategic plan.
You can stay up here if you want. I see Urban Seas as a concept, but it needs a new name, Humanities Environment Earth Lab? Gaia?
I think that they're missing questions. Yeah, they're slipping off.
There's more in the, that we have on our devices than we're seeing.
So I'm not sure how to go to different questions, popular questions.
The one power subcommittee is being formed hasn't been addressed?
Yeah, I mentioned that basically they're being formed from the steering committee members itself, and it's happening right now. Why distinguish between foundational and applied science? I'd love to hear the audience's input on that one. How will the college balance between supporting and growing current programs versus creating new ones? How will equity be considered in this process? Yeah, I mean that's going to be tough. I think where we will start to consider that is as the steering committees start to flesh out the actions below the priorities. But that is going to be a challenge. Growing new programs means, in many cases, growing the resources to support those programs. A lot of the language so far, and I'm not saying it's set in stone because it's not, but a lot of the language so far is really about partnerships, which, at least in my mind, tend to imply that it's less about creating new organizations, but more about trying to take advantage of the capabilities that we have, but maybe in a more creative way. This is going to be, I would think, engender a lot of conversation as we move forward.
Can I make another?
Oh, absolutely.
I also, I have an advantage of coming in from outside. I am so blown away by all the things already underway in the college. And when you look at what Stanford got the gift for and how they structured their gift, they're essentially recreating what we already have. And so I don't see it as a need to really create whole new departments, which is something that they are working on. It's really about strengthening what we already have, and there are so many amazing centers and groups within the college that are, I think, woefully underfunded. And so I think we have the hard part, right? We have the brilliant scientists and colleagues and staff and students here. We just need to tell their story and be ambitious with where they can go, and then the resources will follow. So that's my perspective on that question.
Thanks for digging me out of that hole. Go ahead.
I guess one way of thinking about it is to flip it around and ask, if someone did give us $1 billion or $500 million, what would our priorities be? And that kind of should be what we talk about here. Like if we were to get a whole bunch of money, how would what we spent it on be reflected in what we're talking about here?
So can we rope you into helping the steering committees?
We're all beneficiaries, but
Because, yeah, that's a metric to think big. You know, thinking about, okay, if we got $1 billion, what would that look like? What would we do? And, you know, thinking at that kind of scale as we craft the vision, especially, like, where are we going to go? Where do we want to go long term? What's that big difference that we want to make for the planet? That's how you can help craft that thinking, I think. And I'd love to get some of those crazy, wild-eyed ideas, and not wild-eyed ideas, but get wild-eyed ideas in here, and let's think through them. Amazon is known as the world's largest purveyor of goods. Should we be the world's best provider of scientifically grounded, human-focused knowledge and solutions? Why not? What concrete mechanisms will be there for encouraging interdisciplinary science? You know, I think as we try to start thinking through how to implement these priorities, if indeed they are the right priorities, you know, thinking about the problem and the challenge that you've got, and then figuring out what do you need to address it from across the college. You know, that's where you start thinking about the interdisciplinary kinds of work. That's where you get partnerships built. That's where you get departments working together. That's where you get the college working together. I would like to see the problem help drive the approach and then ultimately the solution. That's my simple-minded view, which may or not be right. That may not have been concrete mechanisms, but I think that's probably the mechanisms that I would see working. Excuse me, science and democracy are intimately intertwined and face unprecedented pressure. The values part of the strategic plan should defend those principles. I think the values part of the strategic plan should also be closely tied to our DEI priority, and that's being woven throughout the plan. You know, I think as we talk about and hopefully think through cultural changes that we want to see in the college, that should be reflected not only in our priorities and our work, but also in our values. So, you know, I think it's about showing the value of science, for not only for us as a scientific community, but solving those problems on the ground that people can see and understand in their everyday lives. And it's not to devalue the kind of far-reaching science that's going to take you to solve a problem way down the road, but it's really about, I think, showing the value of our science, as it said here. I would agree with that. That should include farmers in eastern Washington. How do we engage that demographic on DEI? Well, we are, actually. And I think part of it is really taking, it's about maybe focusing on the solutions piece of the priority and the community engagement part to understand, you know, what are those challenges? What are those needs? What are the challenges and needs of, you know, what they refer to as frontline communities, tribal communities, people that are at risk from, more risk than others from climate change or from the impacts of climate change, like farmers. So I think there's a lot of room for those kinds of connections. We need to be bold, think big, and articulate our differentiators. Is a part of the work to highlight how we are uniquely positioned? I would say enthusiastically yes. And I don't think we've gotten there yet. I think it's still fairly, you know, we're modest in terms of how we're framing this. We can't determine what's socially acceptable, but we can investigate and recommend. This is an amazing opportunity to influence the quality of life over the next few centuries. somebody mentioned the other day is our goal should be to change the course of human history. I thought that was a little bold, maybe too far. But how are student voices and perspectives incorporated in this plan? You know, we've had some interviews with students, student groups. I think we could do more. I think as we've got students, I think a couple students on the steering committee. I'm checking two. But I think there's going to be opportunities to get additional student input as the plan gets further along. I'm hoping that we get some more responses to the very brief questionnaire that we sent out to, which is an opportunity for students. I'd love to get your ideas on how best to engage them. You know, I'm from a non-academic department, so you know, working with Shuey and others, I think to figure out how best to engage them, I think would be something that's very important to do.
We are going to be interviewing the Student Advisory Council as well. They're part of the student group invited to interview.
So Maya said we'll be interviewing the Student Advisory Council as part of this process as well. Thank you. If we are interested in participating in subcommittee work, who should we contact? I would say start with Shuey and I, and we'll reach out to I should probably talk to the individuals that have volunteered to be leads of those subcommittees before I put their names out there. So I think for right now, it should maybe go to the Shuey and I.
And when meetings are scheduled, we should post it on the web.
Yeah, we should post those conversations on the web as well. Thanks, Maya. I want to encourage us to be thinking about emphasis on fundamental basic science as well as solutions. Hear that a lot. Help us with text. I'm not discounting it. I'm just saying that figuring out how to better emphasize that, I think, would be super important because we've heard that a lot.
Yeah, and I also want to emphasize that I don't think you can have good solutions if you don't have the basic science underpinning it. So I feel that's one of our core strengths as a college. You know, many universities can hire people to work on solutions and they can come up with their ideas, but if they're not underlain by a deep understanding of the physical processes of our planet, those solutions could end up doing more harm than good. So I really think that it shouldn't be viewed as basic science and solutions as two separate things. I think it's a continuum. And to get the best solutions, you need the best basic fundamental science. And so that, again, is where our breadth and depth is so exceptional and really positions us in a unique way to address the solutions problem.
So a comment that bounced up with one thumbs up is problem-oriented work points to the need to integrate social science within the physical sciences. The college departments are almost entirely physical sciences. Yeah, again, you know, part of what we hope to do through this is to kind of encourage, support, and catalyze partnerships beyond the college. I'm going to hand this one to Shuey. The last one, how does the plan and interdisciplinary effort intersect with academic traditions, RE, promotions, and tenure? Give you the easy one.
Apparently, I don't have an answer for this, but I would say, so in fact, we are humans, so provide incentive is probably one of the most practical way to think about this. Incentive can be promotion tenure process built in. I think university already started discussing this in terms of how to encouraging that. And then at the same time, culturally, I'm sure we'll beginning, because of the training that many of us here have a disciplinary training. But I think the next generation is actually coming much more naturally. My own students does ocean atmosphere all together. They don't really separate them as much as faculty do, right? So there are definitely ways to do that. I don't have a simple answer, but I think the incentive is very important. So as we go forward, how to make this sort of become a part of the fabric, incentivize how do we do this interdisciplinary. So just as an advertisement, we actually do provide seeding funding for computer science for the environment. That incentive to actually encourage people to do the crossbreeding and accelerating some of the research on both sides.
I'll say something quickly about the tenure as well, because I've heard this concern for years as we talk about interdisciplinary research. I would like to think that the academic community is starting to recognize how fundamental interdisciplinary research is in everything. So I think it's becoming less and less of a barrier. You know, we as a university say that we value it, but of course you go to external letter writers, and so they have to write strong letters. So I know it's always a tension. I think the field is changing rapidly enough that I'm not very concerned about it, but you also can put this in the cover letters when you are requesting letters of reference. The University of Washington or the College of the Environment really values interdisciplinary research or really values community-based work. So these things can be addressed in the cover letter. And then finally, if this is the mission of the college, this is going to be taken very seriously by the college council and by the dean, who are evaluating those tenure packages as well as hopefully by the departments or units that are voting on the tenure package. So I understand the concern, but I don't think it will be a big problem for us as a college.
And no, I didn't put that last comment in, but it's, I would agree that I think it's important for us as a college to think hard and have some consensus on what we plan to do over the next 10 years. What's the time frame of the plan? I would say the future, anywhere from 2 to 8 years, something like that. Maya, is there something different that you had?
I think it's sort of 5 to 10 maybe.
5 to 10? You know, and if we're actually thinking big and bold, trying to accomplish, you know, some of those aspirational challenges, it's going to take some time. It's going to take some time to get our internal act together, to figure out the partnerships, to marshal resources, etc.
Do you want to invite any other committee members?
Yeah, is there any of the folks that are on the steering committee have any comments that you'd like to make, or questions, or what Russell meant to say was, and help me out there?
I guess I'll make a comment. You want me to come up there?
Yeah, if you don't mind, Sally, because it'll be easier to hear you on the mic.
Yeah. So, I'm a member of the steering committee, but more importantly, I was on the Board of Regents when we created the College of the Environment. And I just want to put an exclamation point on Maya's comment about her view of what's here compared to what I think we sort of take for granted that's here. And so the task, and it's clear that we have some work to do, is to convey what's here and where we aspire to go. I would say to your last comment, Maya, if we think we're going to be able to move beyond the traditional mechanisms of promotion and tenure through transdisciplinary or interdisciplinary collaboration, I think we should say that. I think that is a differentiator. So Russell is here answering questions, but I think we're more here to know what the questions are. And I think it's really important to provide suggestions. You know, I'm an outsider, insider, in an unusual position, but I do think that we have the capacity to get the kind of grant that Stanford had. And I'm meeting with people that are very familiar with that grant. We don't want to be poached by that grant, which is also a risk for us. So there's a sense of urgency that I have as part of this to be bold and differentiated. And I think what we put up here, which is predominantly for within the university and the college, is maybe a little different than what might be pitched on the outside. But we have to be able to articulate what the bones are that's great about this place in this university with the amazing support that we have within the university and the deans coming together, that will create the kind of secret sauce that I think will get the sort of funding that we need. So the question that was out there about if we had $1 billion, where would we focus? I think that's probably a good place to put your headspace as you provide input to the plan.
So, I'm sort of curious of what the process here. You seem to be wanting one or two liners, single questions, and your request for input was give us a few lines outlining a bold strategy that might last a decade. I don't see those being compatible. If you
That's
really
your
want
question, yeah.
bold ideas, you need to sit down and do some bold thinking. And so far, I know a lot of work's gone into this, but I'm trying to get my head around where the boldness is coming from.
Yeah, I think this was a way, the Slido thing was a way just to get one-liners, get some quick questions, get some input from the community here. Over the next 2 months, I think that's the time to engage with one of those subcommittees or multiple subcommittees if you've got the bandwidth to do it. One way to do that would be to join subcommittee meetings. Another way to do it would be to take a look at what we've got and what we've already produced and put some thoughts on paper, put some electrons out for us to see. Again, we'd welcome more than just one or two liners. So feel free to reach out to me directly too, and I'm happy to chat with you on it and figure out how to best connect you. And Sally, in terms of your comment of Russell's trying to answer the questions as we go, I can't help myself. So, but part of what's valuable here is that these questions, comments will be archived and available to the subcommittees that are starting to work. So it's one small way of getting input. Hopefully we've also got either got your thinking engaged or hopefully not enraged as you're thinking about where we're going to go here. I'm going to see if there's one more comment from the audience and then... So I think what we should do, I'm looking at John and Maya here, is maybe put out something that's a little bit clearer to the college on ways to connect. If it's not clear to you, I suspect it's not clear to a lot of people, so I think we can probably put something out there that would make it really clear and a mechanism to put comments in. I think it'd also be useful to have a way to have not only attributable feedback, but anonymous feedback so that people don't feel intimidated by speaking to power, if you will. And that might give people more of the freedom and flexibility to say what they think. Although, again, I'd urge you to be constructive.
Could I just to make a comment to John, you created and shepherded with the team one of the most amazing oceanographic observatories the world has ever seen. And you engaged young people in having access to the data and all of that. That's the kind of example I think we all should be thinking about when we think about big and bold and transdisciplinary and furthering environmental education and all of those things. So I think the more examples that we have that illustrate what we have done and where we believe we can go, then the big, bold statements will, that will help shape the story that we're trying to tell.
And how soon do you need that? Triplicate?
By close of business,
I'm just kidding.
no, I'm kidding too. I'm happy to engage with you on that. The intensive work is really going to be happening over the next couple months, I think. So to be considered somewhat in that time frame, I think would be super helpful.
And is there some facet of this that you're trying to
I'm sorry.
link somehow to the National Academy's statement within looking at ocean science for the sustainable development?
Yeah, we haven't done that expressly.
Scale focus.
Right, we haven't done that expressly, but I think that's certainly going to be fodder for for ideas. I'm happy to make some of those links available to the steering committee too. I know we're keeping you from going back and working on that publication, or maybe even going home and seeing your family. So either way, maybe you can do both. So I appreciate everybody's time. I appreciate the input and the questions. I appreciate the engagement, and I look forward to more engagement as we move forward. And you know, Sally in particular, I appreciate your comments and challenges to all of us. And I think that certainly resonated with me, and hopefully you did with the rest of the room. So with that, Maya, is there any final words you want to say, or did I just do it?
No, you just did it, but thank you also for being here, for your input tonight, and for hopefully your continued input. And thank you, Russell and Shui, for your leadership and all the time you've put into this, as well as Sally for your excellent comments.